My recording stopped. Yes, thank you very much. And so it's like Star Trek. It's amazing though, like, everything in every science fiction when we were kids, or when I was a kid, we used to listen to Jules Verne, H.G. Wells, and all these different, it all came true. I mean, even Superman, everything was crystal. I mean, it's all true. And everything they're doing now, then Star Trek, but everything has come to life. And I was watching a movie on, I think it was Netflix, the Contagion movie from years ago. Everything they said is happening right now. Everything in that movie, it's the weirdest thing. About the vaccinations, about the virus, about this, about mutations. Nobody knows except the people that know why they're doing what they're doing. And how many people have had the virus? Mostly everybody. I've had the virus. How many people here died from the virus? See, nobody here died from the virus. So basically, I mean, people do die. Now, do they all die from the virus that they say died from the virus? No. So if someone got hit by a car and died and had the virus in the body, oh, they died from the virus. And it's amazing. This is the smartest virus that they've ever had in our history. Do you know that this virus knows that when you're sitting by a bar, it goes over your head? This virus knows that while you're eating, it won't bother you. It waits till after you stop eating. This is the most intelligent virus. And so now there's this guy, Sean David Morton. They try to kill him. They try to isolate him. They thought he would never, ever, ever come back. And you know what? Here he is, right here.
And my Dr. Grazana is here.
What do you want to be? And I'll point it. Oh, let me see if I can point it to. Oh. Why don't we put it on the podium? And then we can point the podium. Well, I want to. I can point it anyway. I just want to. It's ridiculous. How you guys doing? Good to see you. You're so smoochy these days. Hey, I get what you got.
All right, Archie, just move the podium around, put it on the podium.
Well, I don't know
How about I just get started?
Wires.
Sorry. Couple things I want to show you, which is kind of fun.
Welcome back.
Hey.
Thank you. So this is kind of cool, and I actually put, believe it or not, Mick Jagger is like a huge fan of mine. I know, so they were in the, my wife is a manager at a place called SoFi Stadium, a $6 billion stadium in Los Angeles. And they were doing a sound check, and I got to be in on the sound check, and I walked up and I said, Mr. Jagger, I just want to say hi. I want to meet you. And I'm Sean Morton. And I swear, he looks at me for a second. It's been a long time ago. And he goes, are you the Sean David Morton? And I said, yeah, I love you. I used to listen to Hot Bell on the radio. And hey, Keith, come over here. Keith comes over. And he goes, this is the Sean David Morton. He goes, wow, man, you're freaky, man. I love listening to you. And he gives me a hug, which is like being hugged by the mummy. It was really weird. It was so. Anyway, so I got and then Sunday night I hung out with him, and I put a bunch of people on the phone with him because I have a phone that doesn't make any, it doesn't take pictures. But anyway, I got this very cool Rolling Stone T-shirt from Mick Jagger. So that's actually, and this is something else I kind of had made up because my last name's Morton. Anybody use Morton salt? Growing up, Morton salt girl. We were dating for a while, just didn't work out. So and then this one, okay. There's 3 things you need to know about living in New York. Okay, number 1, there's a mantra that I tell you people that you need to learn in your head. And this mantra I put on a T-shirt. Okay, and the T-shirt says, "I reject your demands as being against my deeply held personal spiritual beliefs." Okay, and it says at the bottom, none yet. Because when people say, well, what are your deeply held personal spiritual beliefs? You say, well, they're deeply held in their personal, which means they're not your fucking business. So there you go. So that's the shirt that I had made up for that. And those are the kind of things. So that's the first thing you know about living in New York. The second thing you need to know is whenever you see, Joe Biden or Campbell Harris or anybody on CNN or whatever, I want you to do this with your hands. I want you to put your fists up like this. Put your fists up like this. Put them way up. And I want you to repeat after me. Hail Hydra. You got to yell Hail Hydra every time you see him. All right, here's one other thing. When anybody, you got to repeat after me now because I'm going to cue you on this. You're a very smart audience. So whenever anybody challenges your personal beliefs, when everybody challenges things that you know are true, when anybody ever tries to basically yell at you or tell you what's going on with you when you know what the truth is. All right, you ready to repeat after me? You say, "Shut up, stupid." There you go. Joe Biden's a genius. The vaccine is good for you. Get into it. It's like you guys are New Yorkers, so that's what you say. Shut up, stupid. It works in every situation. All right, a couple of things. Let me see. I'm going to tell you. My big talk is going to be on Sunday. I guarantee you, if you're not completely shattered, stunned, blown away, Mark will give you all your money back. And here's a couple of interesting things that I just thought were that are not going to be in my talk on Sunday, but that I thought that I would relate to. The first thing, I didn't bring my computer down. The first thing I think is interesting is that Trump has finally established a communications network. He was going to do something called Truth or something like that. You probably saw this, but it was yesterday. And so I was a little disappointed because, Trump kept saying that I was going to do stuff that was going to compete with Facebook, compete with Twitter and all that other stuff. But just to show his businessman greed, his whole thing was, unless somebody brands it and pays me, then he wasn't going to do it. And I was like, okay, so how much is he really for the country, or whatever. So it's but now it's finally been put together, and he's going to do some kind of communication system that's going to compete with Facebook. And, so that's good or bad, I'm not sure. So that's the first thing. Another thing was a prediction that I've made for some time, and I was on Kerry Cassidy's show. I was on Laura Eisenhower, which we've had at the program here for a while. But another prediction just happened 2 days ago. You guys all know about the La Palma volcano. Anybody seen that all over? Now, I've been talking about La Palma for 20 years, and I've been saying that there's like 5 horsemen of the American apocalypse. The first one would be the San Andreas Fault. The second one would be Mount Rainier, because the weak side actually faces towards Seattle. The third one would be the New Madrid Fault, which is this giant crevice that runs up the center of the country, and it's where 2 platelets, the Appalachian plate and the North American plate, butt together. Now, the San Andreas Fault has a bunch of little faultines in it. In other words, you can't really have a 9.0 quake on the San Andreas because it spreads out the energy. It goes out to all kinds of the Hayward Fault, the Vallejo Fault, all these different energies. And but the New Madrid Faults just are it's like 2 ramps just butting their heads together. And so when that one blew in 1812 and again in 1813, the whole city of Madrid, Missouri, New Madrid, just vanished. And be a really bad day. It basically widened the Mississippi River by 100 miles. And the other one I was talking about is the Yellowstone caldera. The Yellowstone caldera erupts approximately every 600,000 years, and it's 30,000 years overdue because it was 630,000 years before this happened. Now, the Yellowstone caldera, and I was on some radio show talking about this, because the caldera began to rise. It rose by about between 32 and about 40 feet. And there were big clouds of gas that were coming out of the caldera that were killing herds of elk. And the Park Service was trying to tell you that the elk were eating poisoned lichen and falling over dead, which is completely stupid. And I said what was going to happen was that the caldera, that there was going to be engineering that was going to be done underneath it, and the caldera would just collapse in itself like a big souffle, which is exactly what it did a few weeks later. Now, La Palma was a big deal. I've been talking about La Palma for about 20 years because La Palma is this island on the end of the Canary Islands, off the coast of Africa. And the island itself is a volcano, but there's a big crevice that runs down the center of the island. So the idea was that if this volcano was to explode, this part of the island would actually slide into the ocean. And if it slid, it's like something like 300,000 metric tons of rock. And if it slid into the ocean, we're talking about a tidal wave about 300 meters high that would then be traveling at almost 800 miles an hour, almost the speed of sound, that would then cross the Atlantic. It would make bad day for everybody. Just wipe out everything. Wipe out Jamaica. That's no good. You can't not have Jamaica, where all the good brass and music come from. It's funny. I had an old man in Jamaica. I asked him. I said, "What's the secret of life?" And he says, "The secret of life is life." He says, "In Jamaica, there are no problems, only situations." So I thought that was great. So now, all the fear porn people for some reason come to me. And, and even the Hopi people come to me. And I say, come on, this is not going to happen this way. It's not going to happen the other way. But when I started talking about La Palma on the radio years and years and years ago, the military actually picked up on it. They went before Congress and they said, we need to destroy this island because it's a direct threat to the national security of the United States. And Congress, of course, did nothing. So after that, one of the things I noticed was that there were all these little microquakes on the leeward side of the island, because the whole island started sort of vibrating, facing towards, Africa, Spain, Europe, and what have you. And I've written a series of books called the Sands of Time series, and I'm very sorry that we can't keep them in stock. Every time I go through printing, they sell out because the books have become a complete global cult phenomenon. And I'm working on book 4 in the series right now, actually upstairs in my hotel room, and which is going to be book 1 in another trilogy, which is about this guy, Ted Humphrey, not his real name, but I've discovered this man who I became friends with, who used to start coming to my lectures. He'd stand in the back of the room in a fedora hat, a trench coat, with a very government black ops mysterious. And he's like, let me take you to dinner. And it's like, I had no idea who this guy was. And he started telling me that that's right, and that's right. And he started feeding me information for me to go on coast to coast with our bell in front of 26 million people and at least get information out to people. It wasn't until years later that I got called in by some very spooky lawyers in Century City who said, we have an estate matter for Mr. Humphrey's estate. And I said, well, did he die? And they said, well, he's moved on. So they never told me he died. He never said there was a funeral. He just said he's moved on. I said, what the hell does that mean? So we can't tell you, but you need to sign these things where you're not going to reveal his name because his wife is still alive, living in Russia, and he's got kids, and it could compromise national security, and we will mess you up if you tell anybody his name. But you can do anything you want with these journals. I got a stack of these leather-bound journals that were all his handwritten accounts of his adventures, but it all had to do with time travel. It all had to do with him and his father working on basically alteration of time. Now, it's interesting that the United States Navy has just come out just in the last 2 weeks. And it actually made an admission that, yes, the Navy can actually manipulate time and space. And this guy gives an explanation. And I will show you the video, by the way, tomorrow, an explanation of how these, you see these triangles, and the triangles have lights at the nose and at the back. And he basically explains how these work and how they alter time. And I'll show you, there's a fantastic piece of video out of France. I mean, I'll show you some of the best UFO stuff. If you guys want to see it, I mean, we've got these weird pyramid-shaped things floating over downtown Beijing, like 200 feet off the ground. We've got this triangle-shaped craft, which are called, the classification is TR. So in the military, they started out with the SR. You probably heard the SR-7 Blackbird. And that was flying at Mach 3. Some people said Mach 5, but back in like 1963, 64. That's how far advanced it was. Then it became declassified about 74. Then 78, they retired the Blackbird program completely, and then told you that nothing replaced it, which is not true. SR stands for surveillance and reconnaissance. These triangles then came in called the TR program, which stands for terrestrial reconnaissance. And what these things do is they go out into space, they just kind of float in space, this triangle, and they have interdimensional capabilities. They can actually go from here to there, and there's a quantum field bubble in the center. I'll show it to you. I mean, I have video where the quantum field bubble activates, and out it goes. Thanks for coming. And so the reason I was talking about this is because there were two things that Ted Humphrey said that I made them aware of that was then things started happening because of the expo here, and because of my being on the radio and all this other stuff. By the way, I had a very nice tie. I didn't have time to put it on, but I had a very nice blue tie with this suit. So I'm sorry I just got the wrong blue shirt. Number one was Y2K. You guys remember Y2K? All right, let's do some interesting stuff. It's not going to be my talk on Sunday, since it's all the stuff that kind of fills it in. We were talking, we had a panel, Y2K panel, I think in 96, I think 97 here, all the experts on Y2K and all this other stuff. And then of course, you think that nothing happened. So Ted Humphrey tells me that not only did they start working on it, but they spent apparently trillions of dollars fixing this problem. And then they said, so you didn't notice that on right after the year 2000, right after January 1st of 2000, there was like a huge economic hole of where all this money went. And he said, we fixed it kind of. And I said, what do you mean kind of? He said, well, I feel bad that we couldn't fix all the computers because the DOS Microsoft systems are such crap. Mm-hmm. And he says, the unfortunate part is when you understand how this worked, Bill Gates kind of grasped his way into IBM. He sold an entire system to IBM that he didn't have an operating system for. So they bought it. He panicked. He ran around Seattle and he found some hippie guy that had an operating system. He paid him $25,000, which is more money than this hippie had ever seen in his life. And he bought DOS. And after he bought DOS, you have to realize that DOS is like an outhouse. It's literally a crap hole. And all of Western civilization is built on this outhouse. And there was a big argument between Jobs and Gates, because, by the way, they both stole the personal computer from Xerox in Manhattan Beach. That's where they actually got the interface and desktop interface, the whole thing. And there was an argument between the two of them. Anthony Michael Hall was a friend of mine, is a friend of mine. And he played Bill Gates in this TV series called The Pirates of Silicon Valley. I'm not sure if anybody ever saw it, but I used to help him run lines and, do this kind of thing. And there's an argument between Gates and Jobs, where Jobs is like, look, don't get all high and mighty on me, Bill. I stole it out the front door. You just stole it out the back. We both know we stole everything from Xerox. And he says, and nobody's going to buy your computers because they're crap. And Gates goes, nobody cares. He says, nobody cares. I'm going to make them cheap. I'm going to sell them cheap. And he says, I don't plan on making money in computers. That's your thing. He says, you're the one selling washing machines. How many times in a lifetime do people buy a washing machine? He says, I sell soap. And that's the software. And he says, I'm going to make billions of dollars selling soap. And of course, he was right. And Jobs had to reinvent himself all the time to sell these computers. So this is what's interesting. And this is what's going to be interesting in the shift that you're going to see in the next 2 years. Ted Humphrey tells me 98 or so. I said, what about Y2K? He says, we fixed it kind of. And I said, what'd you do? He said, we just kicked the can down the road. And I said, how so? He said, we managed to somehow reset the computers. So the off date on Western civilization as we know it, everything is based on Microsoft, is now January 1st of the year 2034. So one of the things you will notice in the whole new next wave of Mac computers is they're no longer based on DOS, nor are they based on Intel, because Intel is all based on DOS. And they're shifting away. They're going back to, I guess, what you call the velocity architecture infrastructure, which is before Intel and Microsoft bought out most of the controlling stock in Apple. And basically Gates came along and saved Jobs, because Jobs had just run the country into the ground with a bunch of new computers that didn't work very well. So this is when he was doing Lisa and Lisa 2 and finally came up with the Mac concept. And also, I think that's kind of an interesting case in point. The other thing was La Palma. And I asked about La Palma, and he says, we're dealing with it. We're handling it. And I said, what does that mean? He goes, we're handling it. And all right, so here's what's been going on. And this was a big prediction that I made all over the TV and the radio or whatever, the Kerry Cassidy show or Eisenhower show. I said, what my Sands of Time books are about is about something called the group. And the group took over for MJ12. And MJ12, as it disintegrated and as the people died or whatever else, the group sort of absorbed MJ12. And the reason they call it the group is because they run a consortium of legal and illegal companies all across the world, which make trillions of dollars, in which they fund the Black Space Program. They fund our base on the moon, which is called Cape Malabar Radio, which is on the North Pole of the moon. They fund gigantic star cruisers like the USS Grissom, USS Shepherd, USS Glenn. One of these I actually saw at Area 51 with a friend of mine, John Hadley, who was later murdered. But this thing was 1,600 feet from tip to tail, flew right over our heads. It had a huge blunt nose on the front of it. We were trying to film it, but it was about 4 o'clock in the morning. And it has a blunt nose. It looks just like Darth Vader's Avenger Star Cruiser, except it doesn't have a pointy nose. It had a blunt shovel nose on it. It was black on the bottom and then silver on the top. But again, it was 1,600 feet from tip to tail, flew right over our heads, went over the town of Rachel, which was 18 miles from where we are. And instead of coming in from the south, landing at Area 51, which is over the hills over Bald Mountain, it came in the other way, and it came in around and it made a big sweeping turn. And then it came behind Bald Mountain. The whole thing just hung in the air for a moment and then landed at the facility. And it was the first time ever that the Whack and Hut Camo Dude security guys had actually chased us. And because John's putting the camera equipment in, and suddenly I hear these engines coming out of the dirt. And John's like, we got to go. And we jumped into his truck. Now he'd taken out the taillights on his truck. And so we jump in the truck and he pulls on this this rig that made him look like a praying mantis, which is a Russian night vision scope. And he starts tearing along at 120 miles an hour in pitch blackness while we're being chased by these camo guys. And I'm screaming my lungs out. And we make it to the little alien, right? He basically drifts the truck and slams into one of the buildings. We throw a tarp over it. We run into one of the it's all motorhomes there that are part of the motel. and we throw the mattress up against the door, we throw the table up against the door, then we tip over another table. He pulls out this gigantic 44 Magnum gun. I think I've got this little tiny, whatever it was like this little tiny 38. And we're sitting here, over the table, pointing him at the door. And somebody comes up and just tries the knob of the door and it's locked and they go away. We survive, obviously. So it's the only time they chased us with this thing. So I asked him about La Palma, and because I knew they were handling it, in the presentation, I will show you that they've been blasting La Palma with scalar wave weaponry for the last couple of weeks. And you'll see shots from space that show La Palma here with these big concentric circles actually coming out from it. And then these bizarre plumes that are coming in, so they've been blasting the whole thing with scalar wave weapons. The one piece of footage that I tried to get to show you where I had proof of it being used before was the World Trade Center. And when the World Trade Centers came down, there was a single metal beam. The World Trade Centers were built like an umbrella, where there was a single beam, and then everything was cantilevered off that single core. So the core was still left standing. And there's actually video, if anybody can find it, but I don't know if they took it off YouTube or whatever, but you can see this core, and somebody who films it, the core just vaporized. I mean, it just literally looked like it turned to sand. It just blew away in the wind. And this was scalar wave weapons. There was a whole suite, by the way, of exotic weapons that were used to take down both those towers. And it was the world's greatest magic trick. So, and then it's interesting because the real mystery is WTC-7, the Solomon Brothers building, which just explodes on its own. And you have the 9/11 report, which is about this thick, and not one mention of WTC-7, not one. Now, I don't know if you guys watch movies, but if you've ever seen Die Hard 3, the one that has Bruce Willis and Samuel Jackson, where they're running around, and the terrorists, it was Jeremy Irons, have all these bombs in these schools. And the whole thing is to distract the cops and the police so they can steal the gold out of the basement of WTC-7. That's the plot of the movie. The plot of the movie was 97 or so. So 10 years later, they released photographs of these firemen who were doing this, and they're standing in front of these vault doors that are wide open, and all the gold is gone out of WTC-7. Now they asked Larry Silverstein, they said, what about WTC-7? And he, in an interview, said, oh, we pulled it. Exactly said, we pulled it. In other words, we demoed the building. Well, it takes months to put in explosives to demo a building. And you'll remember that Giuliani was using WTC-7 as his headquarters, and there was video of them all running out of the building because the thing was going to explode. Well, there was a fourth airplane somewhere, and that fourth airplane didn't hit that building. And at some point, Cheney just went, hell, blow it. We'll just cover it up. Nobody will know. And there's footage of a BBC reporter standing in front of the building going, oh, it's horrible, the tragedy of the Solomon Brothers building that's been destroyed, and it's still standing right behind her. Did you see this? Everybody see this footage? This is 45 minutes before they blew the building up, and she's standing in front of it going, oh, the tragedy of this building being blown up, it explodes, and she's reading from a script that they just lost a page from. So they actually, so they blew up the building without the fourth plane actually hitting it, or the third plane hitting the towers, whatever else. Anyway, so now what's happened is my prediction came true. As of 2 days ago, La Palma just collapsed, on itself. The whole volcano just went, and now it filled in the hole, and the thing was sort of melting. It's like if you have an ice cream cone, and the ice cream falls off the cone, as opposed to you holding it, the whole thing just kind of melting. And that's what the volcano did. There was so much lava coming out of it, the whole volcano just kind of melted, and then the actual caldera of the volcano itself just collapsed in on itself, filled in the gap, and so La Palma is not a threat anymore. And I was telling everybody it was going to be fine, that you guys weren't going to be wiped out. But over and over and over again, and I've had this argument, once again, I seem to get on with all the fear porn people, but I'll say, how dare you say that there's people out there that are doing good? How dare you say, and there's, what about this group people, and they're enslaving us, and they're giving us all vaccines and whatever. And I said, look, they don't care about that. The people at the very top that control the super technology, we're talking time travel, we're talking interdimensional travel, we're talking light speed travel, all the stuff that I saw at Area 51, all the stuff that you could go out there on a Wednesday night and put up a deck chair like the drive-in, and at 6:30 when the sun went down, you would see discs flying all over the place and zipping all back and forth. I took Conan O'Brien out there, and he was the head writer on The Simpsons at the time. So I took all the Simpson guys out there. Then I took Betty Thomas, who was a director. She directed Private Parts, and was the other one, the Brady Bunch movie. Now she had a girlfriend, and the girlfriend was afraid of her own shadow. And I said, what's wrong with your friend? And she goes, well, she's going through a difficult divorce. And I said, okay, why? Who was she married to? She goes, well, she's married to an actor. And I'm like, well, that kind of explains it. I said, have I heard of the guy? And she goes, well, yeah, she was married to Robert Englund. And I was like, the guy who played Freddy Krueger, that was her ex-husband. God, no wonder she's mental. And and she wrote the movie Lost Boys, so whatever, took them both up the top of the hill. She had bad ankles, I guess, and I had to put her on my back and carry her down the hill. But they saw stuff, and the one, probably the biggest one I took out there was Dean Devlin. And Dean and I were up on top of the mountain looking down on the base, which really pissed off the military. And he goes, so they've got alien technology there. And I said, yeah. And he said, so if we got attacked by aliens, this would be like our last line of defense. And I said, yeah, we'd probably use stuff from there. And that's where the idea Independence Day came from. And he wrote the movie Independence Day, and it was all about Area 51. And he actually called me and said, you'll never guess the letter that I got. I got to fax this over to you. Back when we had fax machines. And I said, what is it? He said, the military just pulled all the support from my movie. He says because they were going to shoot it at Miramar. They had jet aircraft. The military had 100% cooperation. And they wrote him a letter. And they said in the letter, if you mention Area 51 in your movie, we're pulling all our support. And he's like, his response was, I can't not mention Area 51 because you can't have a movie about aliens and not mention Area 51. And then they pulled the support. That's why he had to shoot the whole thing in Utah. That's why you saw those white sands, because the Mormons are all about that stuff. They were like, yeah, we'll help you out any way we can. And he actually went to Comic-Con and showed this letter at Comic-Con saying, this is how sensitive they are about Area 51. My friend Sean took me up to the top of the hill, where we looked at the base. So anyway, so La Palma has collapsed, and there's a number of different things, for example, that I can tell you that this group has done. Kerry Cassidy keeps saying, what about this and that and the other thing? And I'm like, look, they don't care. They don't care about Biden. They don't care about the economics. That's up to us. And they keep saying, we're not going to interfere in your culture. You want to hang yourselves? That's fine. What our job is to stop is, one, to stop terrestrial threats, the planet itself murdering you all. Two, extraterrestrials coming from outside. And again, to tell you the threat that the universe is not a nice brotherly place. Matter of fact, there was a Vladimir Putin, when he had his big summit with Donald Trump. You never heard anything about this in the West, nowhere. But it went all over Russia, all over Eastern Europe, every place where, oh, hey, how you doing? Is this for a court case by any chance? This guy take pictures of the back. So and what Vladimir Putin said is that President Trump, my strongest suggestion to you is that before you leave office, you must tell the world everything that you know about 9/11. And you must tell them about the 27 alien races that we are currently in contact with, 2 of which are actively trying to destroy us. This is the president of Russia talking about this. And people are still complaining about, UFO disclosure, and is the government going to come out with stuff? And it's interesting because here's what happened. Originally, they said UFOs don't exist. Then they said that UFOs aren't dangerous. This is how it progresses all through the 50s. The Condon report then comes out and says UFOs are, they're not dangerous, but people who see them are. That's what was the interesting thing. And he also said that people that report UFOs should be horsewhipped. This is in a government report where he's talking about this. And then it went from that to okay, we can either confirm or deny, where we don't know whatever's going on. And the weird thing about it is that I think that the whole point of all of this being is that I don't think they're UFOs anymore at all. So the government's telling the truth. They're all IFOs. They're all identified flying objects. We know everybody that's coming in or going out, and we have them identified. And before 2006, about 2005, 2006, we had kind of an enforced treaty with these beings, which is called the Isomer Protocol. And that's what I wrote book 3 about. The Isomer Protocol is basically a memorandum that says, you stay on this planet. We don't want you infecting the rest of the solar system or the rest of the galaxy. Because as far as we're concerned, even your language is a virus, and you're going to stay here. And that's pretty much what they told Eisenhower in the famous meeting in 1953 when they pulled him off the golf course in Palm Springs, and they dragged him over to what is now Edwards Air Force Base, used to be Muroc back then. And this was not the friendly, happy, sappy meeting people thought it was. They shot down 2 of our jets, and they landed, and they said, you bring your leader to us right now. And they grabbed Eisenhower, and they said, here's the deal. Number 1, you're going to stop testing atomic bombs. He says, because you don't know what you're doing. He says, not only are they dangerous to the planet, and this is the interesting part, because the atomic weapons were opening up holes in the time-space continuum. They were literally blowing holes in the fence. And once they blew holes in the fence, we were open to invasion. And here's the third threat. that most people don't even understand is that there's a threat from what we call ultra terrestrials. In other words, stuff that comes from other dimensions. And when you have UFO flaps, this is from studying this for all these years, whenever there's a big UFO wave, it's usually accompanied, you don't hear much about it anymore, but it's accompanied by what we call bug-eyed monster phenomena, BEMs. And like in Puerto Rico, as an example, anybody heard of chupacabras? Okay, you guys know about chupacabras because I went down to Puerto Rico and I was running through the jungles of Puerto Rico for 2 weeks chasing chupacabras, which is really kind of fun. And we got the governor on tape, we got the Secretary of Agriculture, and they were saying, "Oh no, this is some monkeys that escaped from a zoo." I'm like, "Okay, you got blood-sucking monkeys in Puerto Rico that apparently have power drills, Black & Decker diamond power drills that are killing all these animals." And they've lost about 2,500 livestock. Now it's funny because on one side of the island near San Juan, you had what they call the chupacabra poquito, which is the little chupacabra, and then the other side you had them attacking horses and cattle, which is called the chupacabra grande, which you get at Taco Bell with sour cream, by the way. So it's a great special over there. And so January 1st of '96, USC was playing in the Rose Bowl against Northwestern. I remember because my producer was a Northwestern guy. And we get a call and we show up at this guy's farm and he's got dead rabbits laying all over his farm. And all these dead rabbits have drill holes in their heads and in their side. And these chupacabras, he came out with a stick and chased them away with a baseball bat. Dogs hiding out of the house. The wife won't come out. Everybody's screaming. And at one point, they picked up one of these cages, weighs about 90 pounds, and threw it up the hill at this guy because he's yelling at him with a flashlight. And then the three of these things just bounced off into the jungle. Well, chupacabra's only this high. All the jungle in Puerto Rico is this high. So he saw three of these things, and what they've done is they've reached in, grabbed the rabbits, choked them, and then they have these tongues that pierce right through flesh and bone. They make a perfectly flared hole, and they sucked all the blood out of these rabbits, so there's no rigor mortis. So we took them to a local veterinarian, and who studied at the University of Kansas as a vet. So he's an American guy, and he showed us. He said, "Look, let me show you this." He says he pulls back the skin on the rabbit, shows us the mandible. He says you would need a diamond chip drill or laser to make this hole. And we said, "Are there a lot of incidents of this?" The guy laughs. He takes us to the back through the big garage. And he's got a freezer back there where there's like dozens and dozens and dozens of these animals all been killed the same way. And he goes, "Look, I don't know what the government's doing, but it's wiping out the livestock here. And they're running all over the island. And, the government just laughs it off like it's just the imagination of people in Puerto Rico." It was kind of funny because there was a song on the radio that went, "La chupacabra, did you come out of the sky? La chupacabra. Or if I haven't smoking marijuana." And so that was a big hit song in Puerto Rico. So anyway, the only reason I mentioned that is because at the same time, Puerto Rico was having this wave of UFOs. And it's sort of like the bad kids, when they come through, they open a dimensional door and the bad kids leave the door open and stuff comes in from other dimensions in reality. And if you study the Mothman, if you study the Jersey Devil, if you study the chupacabras, they're all blood-based for some reason. And so they're constantly needing blood to sort of survive in this dimension, I guess. So they're all vampiric. And then you go back all the way to Roswell. We talk about the secret of Roswell. Now, Dr. Fred Bell invented things like this. All right, I've known Fred. He's always my Uncle Fred because I've known him since I was 5 years old. And Fred graduated from the University of Michigan. Graduated from the University of Michigan when he was 14, and was actually doing time experiments. And what they were doing is that they were exploding things. And one of the things that's interesting is that when anything that explodes actually creates a time dilation at the center of the explosion. So years later, we had the ability to teleport probes into the heart of Russian military experiments where they were testing atomic bombs in order to gather data on the time dispersal and the dimensional rip of these atomic weapons. That's what my book Sands of Time opens with, was them transporting these things. And what they found a way to do is that they teleported them to the moon so that they would cool down to minus 250 degrees, then teleport them, then take them back to the moon to cool them off, and then bring them back in the laboratory. When they did this, they created a time dispersion. They created a time bubble around Montauk or Camp Hero that you probably heard of the Montauk experiment and all that stuff. And I'll talk about that because the Montauk experiment is going to affect you in New York again in 2 years. So, and as a matter of fact, in August of 2023, you're going to have another time dispersal and another blackout in New York. So here's another prediction for you. I'll talk about Al Bielek. Actually, Al Bielek, I supported him for the last years of his life. I was giving him money so he could pay his rent. And even though he had the wildest story on two wheels, everything that he ever told me checked out. Every scientist he talked about, every project he talked about, everything that I could physically check as a researcher, reporter, you know, working for Hard Copy and Unsolved Mysteries and Paranormal Borderline, and you know, I mean, I started the Sci-Fi Channel. I had the first original show on the Sci-Fi Channel called Mysteries from Beyond the Other Dominion. And thanks. And we had a great host. We had Dr. Franklin Gould, who had this giant Coke bottle glasses, and this mustache, and he was like, "Do you know clams are from Venus?" You know, we would go out look at clams in Santa Monica Bay and crazy stuff like that. And then started UPN, because we had the first original show that I produced on UPN called Strange Universe. And Strange Universe lasted for about 3 years or so. But we had Star Trek Voyager, we had The Guardian, we had Gemini Man, and then we had Strange Universe as kind of the key around UPN. So it was fun working at Paramount, you know, hanging out with the people there. We go over to Stage 9 and go watch Kate Mulgrew and Jerry Ryan rehearse for, you know, for Star Trek Voyager, go hang out on sets over there. And anyway, where was I? Oh, okay. So yeah, so the Montauk experiment. So Al gave me a hat, which I have, Destroyer Escort 173, that was from the USS Eldridge. And apparently this hat has been all over time and space. It apparently went to the year 2137 and then went to the year 2700. And then he came back and was tasked with actually destroying the mechanisms inside the USS Eldridge to make it stop. I'll tell you a little bit about, well, this is, you're going to see it in my presentation on Sunday. When the Eldridge blipped into time space, Al Bielek's name at that time was Edward Cameron, and he was there with his brother Duncan Cameron, and they were the two brothers that were tasked with throwing the switch on the degaussing coils around the outside of the ship, which they just thought was going to make it radar invisible, and instead the thing went screaming through time and space. And here's the weird secret about it. There was a group of scientists that were the smartest guys on the planet. You had John Van Neumann, Vannevar Bush, Nikolai Tesla, Albert Einstein. Tesla quit the experiment in Christmas of 42, because when he was told that they were going to put men on the ship and that they were going to teleport these men through time and space, Tesla quit. And he said, "You guys don't know what you're doing. I'm out." Now, he supposedly died on the 33rd floor of this hotel, but there's a body of evidence that is very strange that they put a double in this place. And it was the double that died in this hotel, because I have eyewitness reports of people who supposedly had interactions with Nikola Tesla well into the 1950s and early 1960s, which would have made him, he was 86, I think, when he supposedly died in 43. So that would have made him over 100 years old. And he had figured out how to use electricity to like rewind his cells or something like that. So it's just very interesting, because I think that he was just too dangerous to be left laying around. So I think they absorbed him into the military industrial complex and then put a double in his place. But the guy who died in this hotel, his face, his ears, we've done a whole analysis on this. They don't match the Tesla that we knew. So just kind of interesting. So they do the experiment in 1943. There is a group above these scientists that called themselves the K group. And the K group was telling the scientists what to do. And I'm like, okay, well, who is smarter than these guys? I mean, these are the guys that were pulled off the Manhattan Project and the atomic bomb in the middle of the Second World War to work on this because it was more valuable. And yet you've got a group of people telling them what to do. And they insisted that the experiment be performed on August 13th of 1943. Now, Bielek explains that there is a biorhythmic pattern to that, just like human beings have mental, physical, spiritual patterns. Matter of fact, you used to be able to go into coffee shops or Denny's. You used to be able to get your biorhythms. I don't know, you put a quarter in the machine and it comes out with a card saying what are your good days and bad days. And the only reason I know this is because they used to be next to a little kiosk that sold star scrolls. Anybody know? Anybody see star scrolls? And you play a quarter and then you roll this out. It was your calendar. I used to write those in college. So that was my first big college job, was actually writing star scrolls. So because I had my knowledge of astrology, it was funny because you had little symbols, and I'd make up things like reflection would behoove you more than getting wasted on the floor. A workout gets you out the door. And so Bielek was saying that the Chinese had this all figured out, and that the Chinese calendar runs in 12s, and then it runs through the animals of the zodiac, but then it runs through the 5 elements, and 5 times 12 is 60. And so every 60 years, the planet hits a biorhythmic low point. but it goes every 20 years, and then it goes every 60 years where it goes particularly deep, and then it goes back to 20-year cycles, through this where you have these biorhythmic flows. One of the things I noticed that every 20 years, you'll have a war, you'll have a revolution, you'll have something economic or dire that's going to happen. And on the 60-year cycles, it's really bad. So we got this 60-year cycle, August of 43, whole planet's at war. Everybody's killing each other, on every continent. And his explanation was that dimensional time and space had collapsed like an accordion. And so they wanted it performed on that particular day because the elders then shot through that dimensional collapse and created these massive holes in the time-space continuum in 20-year increments. So when the time-space continuum went back, you got these giant holes every 20 years in the continuum. So these beings could come in and start to invade the planet. Now, this is how this affects all of you. Anybody remember the blackout in New York City in 2003? You know what date that happened? Anybody? August 14th of 2003, which was the anniversary by a day of the Philadelphia experiment. And this was predicted by Al Bielek. And I wrote a huge article about this in February of that year, saying if this is real, the Elders is going to reappear in a massive electromagnetic burst of energy, and it's going to black out the East Coast. It's going to have some bad effect on the East Coast. Now, New York was blacked out for 48 hours. The rest of the East Coast, all the way to Ohio, was blacked out for almost 28 days. So the whole Eastern Seaboard is blacked out by this. And by the way, I have the reports where Edison said something occurred where there was an electromagnetic pulse that happened in the blink of an eye. This is Edison. This is the PR guy for Edison. It happened in the blink of an eye that overloaded all our systems, and we still to this day do not know what it was. It was the Eldridge actually snapping back at the end of his tether, and it snapped back to 2003, which then snapped back to 1943, and then supposedly Edward Al Bielek and his brother came back, destroyed the device and the mechanism. When he went to the future, they claimed the Eldridge kept snapping back and forth through time and space, opening these gigantic holes, which lead to this gigantic war and lead to the Earth, being almost destroyed by the year 2137, I think is when he went to. But okay, so another 20-year low point is coming, and that's going to be in the summer of 2023. So if you'll notice, by the way, also if you go 43, 53, 63, right about that same time, you had the death of Marilyn Monroe. And I know it doesn't seem like a big deal, but the Kennedys murdered Marilyn Monroe. You guys know this, right? And again, she was having an affair with JFK. JFK sent his brother RFK to go console her. She winds up having sex with him. Then she says, I want you to divorce your wife because he had like 13 kids or something. And or I'm going to expose everything I know about Cuba, everything I know about the missiles, everything I know about UFO stuff. And so on August 8th, they had her killed. And this is when the mafia then decided to cooperate with the CIA in the assassination of President Kennedy. So this is why you have all these mafia shooters like Johnny Rosselli, who's the guy who actually took the kill shot in the storm drain, blew off Kennedy's head. I actually heard that from Joe Bonanno himself. I was backstage at a show called Conspiracy Zone. And I said, so who really shot Kennedy? And he goes, I spent 20 years in a cell with this guy at Sing Sing, but I'm telling you, Johnny Rosselli is the guy who was in the storm drain. He's the guy that blew that effort Kennedy's head off because they didn't like it much. But from August through November, this low point continued, and there's going to be another one of these low points in 2023. Now, I'll show you some projections. Every cycle that I know of, and I study cycles, part of the aspect of prophecy is that in the Old Testament, the word prophet actually in Hebrew means singer of righteousness. And it basically meant somebody that came out, made up kind of a song or a poem and tried to teach you the laws, God's laws. And when he taught you these laws, he would tell you, look, if you keep going down this road, you're going to wind up there. So, and if you repent and go down the other road, then you'll get blessings and whatever else. So you have these cycles that go in 50 years. And if you do the things that you're required to do in the Bible every 50 years, you get blessed, you get strong, you possess the gates of your enemies. If you don't do those cycles for 4 cycles of 50, 200 years, you go into what's called the 5th cycle of discipline, which is 50 years where your country goes down, 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 and is eventually raped and enslaved, and your children are carted off and your businesses are carted off. You'll see what they're doing with the United States now is they're foreclosing on you. You're bankrupt and they're foreclosing on you. What do? First, they take away your businesses. They take away all the stuff in your business. Then they start taking away all the stuff in your house, your TV, your couch, whatever. Then they take away your house. And eventually in the old days, they used to enslave your kids. Well, your kids are more enslaved now than any slave in the Civil War because they owe $1.7 trillion to the banks in student loans. And if you want an education, forget about it. You're in debt for the rest of your life. And by the way, they removed the fundamental right.
Sean, we have like 3 more minutes.
Okay. Thank you, God.
I love when you call me God.
Okay. Yeah. See, it is a Jewish God. I tell you, it's a Jewish God. Who would have thought that he's Italian and from Brooklyn and Jewish? If Mark didn't discover spirituality and yoga, he would be a crime boss.
Hey, you had to see when I did the 10
Here we go.
commandments.
All right, so to wrap it up, I'm just saying that please come to Sunday. But I will show you that we're at the end of a 250-year biblical cycle, which ends between now and 2025, because we'll be 250 years in 2025. The beginning of the decline of the United States and the world began in 1969, 1970. We're at the end of an economic cycle as well. So this economic cycle, you're going to see a complete restructuring of the economic system. Something has to break because the United States is currently not just 30 trillion in debt, but closer to 300 trillion in debt. And all of this is interest. When you're looking at the budget of the United States, now over 50% of every dollar spent by the government goes towards interest. And if you look at the top 50 companies in the world, all owned by about 700 people. There's something called the Gladfield Index. It's a guy at Harvard that figured all this out. And we say that I'm some crazy conspiracy theorist for saying this, but it's this index that shows you how each corporation is owned by another corporation, another corporation, another corporation. And there's a red ball at the center, which is like all the 750 guys that own everything on Earth, all the corporations on Earth. Let me tell you one last thing about Trump, which I think is interesting. So we're at the end of a 250-year cycle because the United States turns 250 in 2025. We're at the end of a Pluto cycle, which means Pluto is moving across 27 degrees Capricorn, which is the founding of the United States. And what Pluto does is he sits there with a big scythe, and Capricorn is governments, constitutions, banks, monetary systems, gold, silver, diamonds. One thing you should also do, here's a little financial advice for you. I was told that the gold supply is fine, but that you should right now, within the next 2 weeks, get into silver. If you got any extra Federal Reserve notes laying around, buy silver, because they're telling me already that within 2 weeks, this guy's a candidate. There's going to be no more silver available. And people now are getting sued for billions of dollars because they place silver orders, and silver orders are not being delivered. And I talked to some guys in Canada who said, yeah, silver is gone, it's done. And there's only about $30 billion worth of silver on Earth. And Bill Gates and Warren Buffett own half of it. And the other aspect of it is that they've sold some crazy number, like $5 trillion in silver futures, and there's not enough silver to cover it. And so these companies are now being sued. So right now they've got a little bit of junk silver left or whatever, but you should put money into silver, because silver is about $20 now. But my projection is we're going to see it at probably a low of 50, probably a high of about $75 an ounce. So you should probably get into that. Let me tell you one other interesting thing about Trump and what happened with the election and whatever else. I think I've got 3 minutes to do it.
2 minutes.
2 minutes to do it. Okay, so the clock is ticking. The entire election. Okay, so the election was totally fair. What's my catchword? Shut up, stupid. Okay. The election was totally fair and totally above board.
Shut up, stupid.
There you go. Here's what happened. Right now, another cycle that we're at the end of is that you guys all remember December 21st of 2012, right?
Yeah.
Okay, we're in between calendars right now. In other words, the last Mayan calendar ended the 5,000-year cycle there. The next cycle begins in 2025. But we're in a 13-year tune or period, which is called the night of the jaguar, literally the night of the Black Panther. And we're being eaten by that. If you look at Mayan calendars or Aztec calendars, there's a big jaguar with its mouth open at the bottom of the calendar. We're being digested by that. And this is a 13-year period up until December 21st of 2025. So that's another cycle that's ending, because that whole thing, civilization. So 2012 didn't happen all at once. It's happening a piece at a time. And as we're being digested by the jaguar, hopefully, pooped out into a better world, the new Mayan calendar begins in 2025 as well. So you've got the economic cycle, the biblical cycle, you've got the Mayan calendar cycle, you've got the Pluto cycle, because between now and then, Pluto moves back and forth over 27 degrees Capricorn and just messes everything up, destroys the banking system, the banking structures, whatever. Of the 50 major corporations on the planet, only 2 of them actually produce a product, Microsoft and Walmart. And all they do is distribute Chinese junk. All the rest of them are banks and insurance companies. The number one corporation on the planet, anybody know? Number one biggest corporation on the planet?
ExxonMobil.
Barclays. No, ExxonMobil's way, not even in the top 50. It's Barclays. You know why? Because they handle the money of the Queen of England. And of course, what I say is that when Jesus comes back, he's going to be pissed off. And what did he do when he came back in the temple? What did he do when he came back to Jerusalem? He tipped over the tables of money changers. He got out a whip. And by the way, that's why the Romans crucified him. It was the Romans that did it. The Romans said, you started a riot. That's a crucifiable offense. So everybody says, oh, he's standing in front of Pilate, all innocent. No. He started a riot at the temple. That's a crucifiable offense. Just saying that the Jews took the rap for it. But okay, so here's what Trump did. On December 21st of 2017, which was exactly the halfway point of the Mayan calendar of the 13-year ton, he signed a number of bills. Number one, he signed the First Step Act, which was kind of responsible for getting me out of art school where I was. Signed the First Step Act, but at the same time, he signed a series of acts as well, which dissolved the federal corporation of 1871. You guys with me on this? Anybody? Now, I went on Dun & Bradstreet. I've done the research. Look, I don't expect anybody to believe the word I say. I say, look, I've done the homework. I've done the reading. I expect you guys to say, oh, that crazy Sean Morton guy did what? He was right in front of the computer. And on that day, he dissolved the federal corporation. Now, the federal corporation, I looked it up. You can look up on Dun & Bradstreet. There's a website called manta.com, manta like the fish, M-A-N-T-A-Y, manta.com. And it's got 60 million corporations, and it's got all the Dun & Bradstreet numbers on the United States Marine Corps, Security Exchange Commission, the Internal Revenue Service. They're all private corporations. And you type in United States of America. There it is, private corporation. But who incorporated the United States of America? Well, there it is, 2.7 million employees, 1,500 Pennsylvania Avenue, which is the capital. It's got 3 executive officers. I guess it's the president, the vice president, the speaker of the house. But it has marked as the owner at the bottom. The owner of you know who the owner of the United States government is? The incorporated entity is Archbishop Derek R. McLeod of the Washington, D.C. Archdiocese.
Sean, I'm just going to interrupt that. Judy Satori is coming on now.
Okay.
Sean,
Is she here?
Sean is gonna be on. Yeah, I love you though. But Sean's gonna be on.
Fly in from New Zealand? Okay.
She's gonna be virtual. Sean
Okay.
is back here at 5:30 tomorrow. It's limited space, so you should go to registration to sign up for that.
Okay, that's fine.
Also in the Sutton room, I'm really cutting you off. And also in the Sutton room is Tammy Adams, who's gonna be talking about. I'm sorry, in the Kips Bay room. So you can go to the bottom of the screen and leave this room and go to that room. To resurrecting your life purpose is about finding someone that has been lost. So she's talking about, is it your soulmate or your twin flame? And I love you, Sean, but I mean, yeah, you know, you talk about. And I remember when Doug and Cameron and Bielik, they were my expos a lot. I still have tapes from that. And also this super financial person that told me, you're right, silver is the way to go. Thank you, everybody coming. We love Sean, David, Morton. And
10 seconds.
Back to 5:30.
All I want to tell you is that the election was fixed from Rome as basically a way to get back at Trump for dissolving the corporation. And a guy picked up the phone when the Dominion machines weren't working because Trump was so overwhelmingly elected, called the AFL-CIO, got the mobsters to come in with the trucks, stopped all the machines at 1:38 a.m. And then they showed up with bags of votes that were actually, but that all came from the Vatican. All of that came from the
Who's
Vatican.
going to win the presidential election in 2024?
I'm not even so sure there's gonna be one. I mean, in 2024, the whole thing is gonna collapse and go crazy. I am more of a fan of Ron DeSantis, actually, of Florida, than I am of Trump, because I think, you know, Trump sold you the vaccine, Trump's suspension of debt. Trump did a lot of stuff. I mean, I had a pardon on his desk that he
You
wouldn't,
didn't sign it?
no, he didn't sign anybody's.
Yeah.
I mean, there were 10,000 pardons, 50,000 computations. He walked away from all of them. And the military offered to help him, he walked away from that as well. So nobody, not only did he not drain the swamp, he hired them all to work at the White House on the advice of Henry Kissinger. So not impressed. Oh, yeah, okay. Yeah, Campbell Harris. All right, thanks, everybody. That was just remember the bottom on the shirt. You want to take a picture of this and have it on the shirt?
Give me that US.
I gotta go out and buy it.
Go on Manta, Manta, M-A-N-T-A-Y, like the fish, like the manta ray. And if you look it up now, it says United States Corporation Incorporated. It's got a different thing, but it's not owned by the captain. Nice Star Trek shirt. And I just have this made up on Vistaprint, so you guys can have your own shirt made.
We'll see you tomorrow.
Sorry, what?
We'll see you tomorrow.
Okay.
I already.
That's when you get the vaccine, they put that on.
Yeah, exactly. Put this on and say, what are your deeply held personal, spiritual, personal and deeply held? Not your business.
Yeah.
Thanks a
I'll
lot.
see you tomorrow. I have.
Oh, you do? Thank you so much. Are you guys up?
In an hour. But anyway, we could sit down.
Yes, of course. Yes, ma'am. Yeah. Looks that way. Yeah, he's, like I said, he started a media company 2 days ago. Well, it's a question of whether or not. I mean, if I was him.
I'm Judy Satori. I'm a spiritual channel. I receive messages and transmit energy words of new creation from a more expanded source creation energy that comes from a place that spirit call beyond the beyond. This is an energy source of new creation for Earth and for us as human beings. This new creation energy is streaming to Earth from the heart center of 22 galaxies, configured together in a vast multi-galactic God creation matrix. Put simply, it's an enhanced, more powerful God creation energy, and it's beginning to transform and upgrade everything about our human selves and about life on Earth. It's divinely planned, a process of human evolutionary upgrade. This is Ascension. It's wonderful to see all of you. And today I'm here in New Zealand. Actually in the middle of a level 4 lockdown here. So we're just the two of us in this little room, but speaking to all of you. And I just went out to the garden and see this beautiful little yellow flower. It's called the Ko-Fi. And the Ko-Fi flower is the symbol of the Ascension Library, because the Ko-Fi, see the little yellow flowers just magically appear on the bare branches of this little tree. It's a New Zealand native tree in spring. And so I wanted to show you the Ko-Fi because it's yellow, it's about joy and it's about upliftment. But it also is representing to us a new springtime. We might not feel it in our physical human lives, but there's a whole new energy now on the planet that is here. The old life has gone and the new life has come. And so our purpose really at this time is to adjust to this new life and see where this new life is taking us. So I want to begin today with, I'll just put that there, a karakia. And to the New Zealand Native Maori people, the karakia means the calling. And so the karakia is the calling to all of us, to all of you, from my heart to yours, but also from the heart of God, from the beings who exist in multidimensional realities, in many dimensions, in many mansion worlds of God's creation, of source creation, universal creation. And they call to our hearts to join them in galactic communion and multi-galactic identity. Because this program today, it's about light language, it's about light language mentoring, but it's also about us understanding more about the heart, understanding more about love and about enlightenment and about where we're going on this journey of a soul, which we call ascension, and where we are at right now in our lives today. So settle back and just enjoy, be in joy. We're going to be writing really comprehensive show notes, and there's certain meditations and energy transmissions that I will be writing about and techniques that I'll be showing you how to do, but you don't have to write them down now. They'll be written down and put in the Judy Satori Live pathway. And when you get the replay, they're all going to be there for you. So please don't feel that you have to scribble away on a pad. I want you to truly just receive. They want us all to receive. And they want the energy that is